I guess I'll put the microphone back around. So we'll call the meeting to order, please, and can we call the roll?
Commissioner Burke. Commissioner Dunn.
Here.
Commissioner Art.
Here.
Commissioner Gilmetti.
Present.
Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Kehoe. Commissioner Medaffer.
Here.
Commissioner Tabelloni. Here. Chair Alvarado. We have a quorum.
Okay, we're going to start day 2 with item number 60, Innovations in Transportation. Garth?
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. We're fortunate to have Marvin Amori from Hyperloop One here to talk about his system and give us a quick overview and presentation. Marvin?
Thank you, Garth. It's an honor to be here. So my company is called Hyperloop One. We're based in Los Angeles in the Arts District. We're at the moment hiring about 25 people per month and onboarding them. And we're a total of 250 people spread between Los Angeles, mainly engineers, former SpaceX, Raytheon engineers, and then also in Nevada where we have a manufacturing facility and a test facility. So the concept that inspired the company is called a Hyperloop, which was a concept invented by Elon Musk. And his hypothetical was, how do we get really super fast transportation? And he kind of had a futuristic thought, which was, to do that, you've got to get rid of the wheels, because wheels would break apart at a high speed because of centrifugal forces. And at really high speeds, you need not only an aerodynamic shell, but also get rid of the air pressure. Right? So some fast planes fly high in the air, but his concept was just put it all in a tube, propel it at high speeds. So we came together around that idea, and we're making innovations across the board. 2 or 3 other companies have also been inspired to try to pursue the Hyperloop concept. We have 2 different products that we're inventing. One involves shipping containers, one involves passengers. And the benefit on the shipping container side is more removing trucks from the roads. It's all green, it's energy efficient. It is, the concept is not around speed for shipping containers, but around environmental benefits. Right? And then you could also be short distance or long distance. Right? And so we have a whole set of different products around connecting airports, connecting cities. So I'm looking at the photos behind you. This is a picture of us in August when we were merely 150 people. Right? We're now 100 more people. This is our campus. And just to give you a flavor for the kind of people who've come together around this concept, that it is a real company, and I invite you all to come to our campus. It's kind of like visiting the Batcave. Right? It's full of amazing tech gear. And our president had been, our CEO had been president of Cisco, managed all of Europe, 45,000 people reported to him. Our CFO had been CFO of Uber. He was treasurer at Google. He was CFO of Microsoft Windows. We lured him out of retirement. He sits next to me. And our head engineer is this kind of brilliant young man. It's humbling how young he is, who's inspired engineers from all over the world to move to LA to help work on this. So I invite you at any time to come join us. And our world-class board, there are 3 billionaires on it, from logistics, from transportation, from all over the world. DP World, which runs 70 ports around the world, is a partner. We're doing studies with them. And then we have this whole ecosystem of partners. We work very closely with AECOM here, as well as other partners. And then there's a photo in there that's kind of the sexy photo of just how fast this thing is. 28 minutes in vehicle to Las Vegas from LA, 39 minutes from LA to San Francisco. In the next few weeks, we're going to release a study with AECOM and our advisors, KPMG, around the ports of LA and Los Angeles, or of Long Beach and Los Angeles, around trying to move freight from the ports to the Inland Empire, taking thousands of trucks off the road. We think that's actually an interesting for all the stakeholders involved. We're talking to all the stakeholders to make sure everyone's on board with the idea. We also think it's interesting for the Olympic bid. So there are a few slides in there that no one has seen yet that will be released in a few weeks, and I'm releasing early to you guys. And here are sort of the objectives of the freight network. It's not about speed, it's about efficiency. So those are early photos you have that are up right now of our test site in Nevada, and in just a few months in Nevada, we'll have the first full-scale launch of a Hyperloop system. We call it our Kitty Hawk moment. Again, I'll invite you to that if you'd like to come. That's really going to be fun. So I don't want to take any more time, but I just want you to know that there is a system. Lots of companies are trying to develop it, and we put together a lot of talent behind it. And we have studies going on around the world, 2 in Dubai that we're pretty far along in, and then 2 in Europe, Finland and the Netherlands. And I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've done so far and where we're hoping to go.
Commissioner Gometti?
It's fascinating to me. How big are the modules? Are these passenger? You talked about freight, but we're going to have passenger modules too?
Yes, so we have a big size and a medium size, kind of like Starbucks, there's no small. So the medium size is...
We got the Venti and the Grande.
Yeah, the Venti is for the 20-foot TEUs, so we call that the Venti. And then the smaller one for passengers will be between 9 and 14 feet in diameter.
Okay, and whose right-of-way are you going to use? Or you have to go out and acquire your own right-of-way?
We're going to have to acquire right-of-way. We're essentially going to fit within the way existing transportation networks are licensed and permitted to the extent that we can. My most recent hire was the most recent chief of staff of the U.S. Department of Transportation. So he's helping us think through available rights-of-way, environmental permitting, safety certification. We have a team of 3 engineers thinking exclusively about safety certification. So when it comes to rights-of-way, we believe that our right-of-way for a Hyperloop would have a much smaller footprint and it kind of have less impact than, say, high-speed rail, because it's an enclosed environment, sound doesn't really travel through a vacuum, and we think we could be on pylons sort of over freeways, over medians, and if you're going through areas with cattle, they can pass under the elevated structure. We do need, in terms of our right-of-way, kind of a straighter line because at some of the higher speeds, so that's kind of the trade-off we have in terms of acquiring a right-of-way.
Are you thinking about using Caltrans right-of-way?
We're thinking about any right-of-way that could be available to us, yes.
Okay, one last question. Do these capsules have windows?
You know, that is actually an excellent question, and we have a lot of engineers thinking about how to make that a smooth ride. But you know, we have thoughts around virtual reality and around windows, perhaps no windows. But in terms of the right-of-way, I should mention one of the things we've done, because we want to work with governments, right? We're not one of these startups that's going to be disruptive and get sued like Uber, God bless them. But we're kind of a company where we go first to the government and we say, hey, we want to work with you. So we had a competition we called the Global Challenge, where we asked governments around the world, hey, who's interested? And we didn't expect so much interest, but we got lots of applications in the U.S., including from Nevada, signed by the governor and the congressional delegation, which offered up 3 different rights of way they could study. We had an application from the Florida Department of Transportation, which proposed a route and a right-of-way that they thought would work for us. We have a great application from Colorado, one from Texas, all with government support. And so we've actually seen people willing to sit down and talk to us about how this could work. You know, it's a long-term, big idea, but we're doing all the work with governments and with engineers to try to figure it out.
Thank you.
Commissioner Daffer?
Thank you. So just on that last point you made, what contact have you had with the state of California and what cooperation are you getting from them?
So I'm going to apologize for not knowing all the specifics. As the general counsel, I spend most of my time thinking about financings and contracts. We've had a lot of contact with the state of California. And I can submit a more complete answer.
So we hear a lot about, you know, our modern day Tony Stark, Elon Musk, always talking about doing these different things, this being part of it. And more recently, I understand he's talking about a tunnel in the LA area. I don't see him on your board, so I understand he's not directly involved in this company.
Yes.
But how does that relate to this tunnel thing that he's talking about? Or are they completely 2 different things?
Okay, so let me clarify on the Elon Musk point and then move to the tunnel. So on the Elon Musk point, he inspired the idea, and there are about 3 or 4 companies pursuing the idea. He's not involved in any of them. He's not an investor, he's not on the board. He has several other companies he's running, and so other people ran with the idea. As for the tunneling, the tunnel, I think one application would be to put passenger cars in or trains. Another would be to put Hyperloops in it, and I believe he's considering that idea.
All right, so is there anything that you guys need from the state of California that would help facilitate you, say, piloting, you know, 101 right away, for example? And I understand some of the places where it's pretty curvy, you want to try to figure out a way to go under. And how deep would you be? Are you at 200 feet? You at 500 feet? Or you don't know?
So we've been doing a study that will be out within the next few weeks with AECOM and KPMG. It's our Arctron study, and it has all the details in there, and we're working on some of the numbers and some of the economics of it. I'd be happy to send that study to you guys right when it's released and walk any of you through it with our business team.
Yeah, I would just ask if you'd keep our executive director, Ms. Branson, informed, and so we can stay informed as well.
Great. So I will follow up with you on 2 answers, exactly how much great support we've had from the state of California, because I know we've had some great support and I don't want to undersell it. And also, I'll get you the Arctron study because I think you'd find that very interesting.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you very much. Great stuff. Timing on all of this, when do you think, and if the U.S. isn't the first country, do you think another country might jump in sooner with less constraints than perhaps some of us have here?
The timing on it is, we're moving as quickly as we can. We're going to have a technology proof of concept, or the technology proof by May or June, which you're invited to. And then we're hoping to have our first customer sometime this year, and then work towards what we call our proof of operations. So imagine a 50-mile route that you wouldn't send passengers on for a year, and that you just do all the testing, the safety certification, working closely with government. We want our proof of operations to be built by 2021. So it's about within a 5-year timeline. And it would be a short route, it would be a test route, it wouldn't be a giant route. And then in terms of could another government do it first, that's possible. As I said, we said whoever wants it first will go there, and then once it's proven there, we'll go elsewhere. So Dubai and a few places in Europe have been pretty far on the list. We're now turning our attention more and more to the U.S. for a variety of reasons, partly because we didn't realize how much interest there would be until the global competition, where all these governors and congressmen applied and had really thoughtful and strong applications.
That's great. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Burke?
Well, first of all, let me apologize for coming in late. But
I apologize for bumping you on our way over.
And then I fell in a hole.
Yeah.
But you may have already addressed this, but how does grade affect it, and what can you utilize in terms of grade?
So we can be above grade, we can be at grade, we can be below grade.
Well, in terms of moving on grade, going up or down?
Oh, yeah.
Elevations, yeah.
That is a little trickier, yes. So it's better so I'm not going to give you the full engineering answer, but it's better to have a very straight at sort of grade shot. And so if we're going up and down hills, we would have a tunnel through the hill. And am I answering the question or no?
Yeah, it does. I just wonder if there is any capability for any grade. Does it have to always be at a level?
There's a little capability, but depending on the speeds, not too much. So if we were doing a shorter route where we wouldn't get up to the highest speeds and there'd still be a great benefit, then there'd be a little more give. But if you're trying to do a real high-speed, long-term route, you would really need to make sure that it's at grade. And that's an engineering challenge for us.
Well, thank you very much, and appreciate the presentation. A couple of questions. So basically on the freight slides, and of course I love the fact that you're looking at moving goods as well as people. I think what you're proposing is the inland port kind of concept connector. So you would be, in essence, a modern-day short line rail of some kind then to connect to an inland port as a distribution point. Is that correct?
That's right. And we would partner with the rail companies in order to make that happen.
And do your modules envision just transporting the containers within that module so you don't have to load or unload? You're going to leave the containers intact and move the container within your vehicle?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, well, keep us posted because it's fascinating to me to have folks thinking outside the box, so.
Yeah, we will get you the Arctron study because that will be of keen interest to you.
Okay, and then who's the individual, the chief of staff? Was it from the office of the secretary?
Yeah,
DOT?
Dan Katz, if you know Dan Katz from the office of the
Okay.
secretary.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, keep us posted. We'd love to learn of your progress. So any other questions from my fellow commissioners? If not, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, really appreciate it.
All right, now we're going to go a little bit out of order. We're going to jump down to the action item number 64, please, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 64 is a authorization for a lease agreement with the Fresno Mission. This item you had heard before in January meeting when you authorized direct negotiations with the Fresno Mission. This is the execution of the actual contract with them, with the lease agreement, and staff recommends approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Arp. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. We'll move on then to number 65. Stephen, you're up again.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 65 is a project allocation request. This is a project that is being allocated at an amount that is greater than 20% of the programmed amount. Commission rules specify that when a project is ready for an allocation of funds, an engineer's blue line estimate exceeds the program amount by more than 20%, the allocation needs special commission handling. The commission reserves the right to examine the project and determine if it should be allocated at the greater amount. In this instance, this project originally was scoped to do pave 22 gore areas and 82 areas underneath guardrails as a safety project for maintenance workers. When the permits were being requested, the permitting agency said that you have 2.6 acres of impervious material. They wanted to have some kind of biofiltration swales built into the project. The project does not have any areas where you can build those in, so the designers decided to build in a special filtration system within the gore areas, which then doubled the price per square yard and also doubled or tripled the excavation depth and doubled in working days. So this project now needs $1.3 million to be allocated. Staff examined this and believes this is the right way to proceed. Cutting down scope to keep it within the program is not going to accomplish anything. You'd have to program another project and do it again, and you'd lose economics of scale. So staff recommends that you approve this project at the greater allocation amount.
Is there a motion? We have a motion by Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Burke. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? The motion carries. Moving on, we will go to item 66, please. Stephen, you're up again.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 66 is a request for supplemental programming for the Schofield Bridge seismic retrofit project. The department needs another $935,000 to finish off the design of this project. Staff had a few questions for the department on this project as to what the additional money would be spent on and what the original money was spent on. We have received a pink item from the commission, from the department where they do answer those questions now. I understand what happened, and staff recommends that you approve this supplemental programming allocation.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. Is there any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Moving on.
Question on
Okay,
procedure. So we're leading heavily on Stephen's recommendation on this one because
No, none of us has read this.
Yeah,
I just got it.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
we trust you, Stephen, on this one.
Yes, we've worked this one over with the department all of yesterday.
okay, Stephen, we've got our vote of confidence in you. So I think your points will take in, Commissioner Arp, though, that we probably do need enough time to read before we vote. So in the future, if we could get these a little bit in advance, it would be helpful. I don't know what we could do other than take this last minute info and
Or adjourn for 10 minutes to read.
we could.
Yeah.
Well, that's your pleasure.
Okay, next time we will do that. Don't let us get into we haven't had time to read things, so good point. Thank you, Commissioner. All right, item number 67, Stephen.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 67 is also a supplemental programming allocation for the design of a project. This is a widening of Interstate 8 in San Diego. The original original concept was for a retaining wall in order to expand the capacity of the freeway. When they got into the design of the retaining wall, it was determined that there's a very high water table, so they can't use a standard design. They tried all kinds of different wall designs. In the end, they had to do what is called a geosynthetically reinforced embankment slope, which basically pushed the slope into an existing drainage canal. The drainage canal needed to be shifted over, redesigned also into this project, and it also pushed an on and off ramp that serviced UC San Diego University, and it would made access to the university basically cut off for a very long time, so they had to redesign that also into temporary connections so the university would be served. So all of this drove up the design costs of all of this. Staff has examined this, and staff recommends that you approve the higher programming amount.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. Any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. We'll move on. Item 68.
Commissioners, item 68 is an action item requesting an amendment to the TCIF program to add the Durfee Grade Separation Project at a cost of $2.62 million in TCIF funds. Note that there's a yellow item on this. This is the consensus. This is the attachment, which is the consensus group letter. Staff has reviewed the request to recommend your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 69.
Commissioners, tab 69 is an action item to approve the Trade Corridors Improvement Fund baseline agreement for Project 124, US 101 Marin-Sonoma Narrows High Occupancy Vehicle Project. This project was amended into the TCF program by Commission action at your last meeting, January 2017. The baseline agreement was delivered by the project sponsor with the appropriate signatures. It has been reviewed, and staff recommends commission approval.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Gometti.
Actually, it was the other way
It
around.
was, I'm sorry. Okay. Motion by Gometti, a second by Arp. You guys were too fast for me. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. We're going to skip for the time being item 70 and move on to the next action item, which is 71. Teresa?
Commissioners, item 71 is an action item. This is a financial allocation for two locally administered STIP projects in the state highway system for $150,000 in Siskiyou County. Staff has reviewed these requests, and they are consistent with STIP guidelines and adopted program. Staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 72, please.
Item 72 is an action item. This is a financial allocation advancement request for a locally administered STIP project in the state highway system for $3 million. Staff has reviewed the advancement request and finds it consistent with the advancement policy the Commission adopted. This request is also consistent with STIP guidelines and the program. Staff recommends your approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Gometti, and there was a tie for the second, so I'm going to go to Commissioner Tavaloni for the second. So any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed?
That's right.
Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to go to, next up is item 73.
Commissioners, item 73 is the annual program of projects for the Environmental Enhancement and Mitigation Program. otherwise known as the EEM program. Prior to staff recommendations, Polly Escovedo from the California Natural Resources Agency is here to give you a brief presentation on the EEM program.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the Natural Resources Agency and to give you just a brief background in where we are on the Environmental Enhancement Mitigation Program. That is a mouthful. We simply call it the EEM program. The program was established in statute. Let me just get a lesson here real quickly on, should something come up? There we go. Hold it. Okay. I also appreciate you coming, going a little bit out of order for us. It was an early flight this morning. We're headed to Coachella. We're doing workshops for the new urban greening program under the cap and trade, so we've got a little bit of a drive ahead of us. All right, there's our beautiful logo. I don't know if you've seen the logos out on the highways yet, but those advertise the Environmental Enhancement Program. All right, so this was established in statute under the California Street and Highways Code, with the Natural Resources Agency being tasked with developing the criteria for the program and providing recommendations to the commissioners on an annual basis for awards. The program currently receives $7 million annually for both local assistance and administrative costs. The funding source for this is the highway users tax account, and it is a direct appropriation to the Resources Agency. Eligible applicants include states, federal agencies, and nonprofits. Tribes are also eligible. Tribes are also eligible if they're recognized as a 501c3. And last year, you awarded your first grant to a tribe, the Costa tribe, for an acquisition in the Mendocino County. We're mandated by statute to attempt a 60-40 split with 60% of the funds to Southern California. We get very close each year. Some years we meet that. This year we exceeded that by just a little bit with, I think, 63% going to Southern California. On average, we receive about 60 applications each year, asking for about $23 million. This equates to about anywhere between 20 and 30 projects annually that are awarded. Recommendations are developed using a multidisciplinary team. We have representatives from the Wildlife Conservation Board, the State Coastal Conservancy, the State Water Board, Water Resources, Caltrans, and also state parks. Project types include, and this is what's in front of you there, there's three categories, really two main categories: urban forestry, and those are those projects that are designed to grab carbon and to offset the emissions from carbon dioxide. Then we have our resource lands category. These are mostly acquisitions, but they can be enhancements of property, and this is where we're helping to acquire property that's protecting habitat that might have been lost with a transportation project. We also have a category that's mitigation beyond the scope. This isn't used often, but every once in a while you might get some new laws in place. Somebody might have done some mitigation for a project and they want to comply with some new laws and go in and do further mitigation. Sometimes when you might have some overriding considerations in the CEQA document. So there's a few things that might come into that, or just cumulative impact. Some of these transportation projects, statute allows them to be back from 1990. So sometimes they're old projects and cumulative benefits and additional mitigation is done. So I thought I would highlight some of your past awards, just to give you an idea of some of the good work that's being done with this program. The first one is the Butte County Department of Public Works. This was a whopping $30,000 grant to the county, and this was to mitigate, when they went to start construction, they found that they were going to impact some maternity roosts for some bats. And so they asked for grant money for some precast concrete bat boxes. This, I understand, is a mitigation method that had been tested by the Department of Transportation, and our last report from Butte County tells us that the bats have adapted to their new homes quite nicely. So the project was a success. This was a bridge retrofit in Butte County. The next project is the Land Trust of Santa Cruz, and this was a project to acquire 37 acres in fee title and another 133 acres to put a conservation easement over it. This project kind of fulfills two purposes. It does protect habitat, water quality, it keeps it from development, but also this was one of the last critical pieces for a proposed undercrossing there for State Route 17 for the wildlife corridor. And this project just closed, I think within the last couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. What made this project highly competitive was, a lot of it was the partnerships, and there were a lot of studies that were done, including studies by Caltrans, UC Santa Cruz, on where the best place for this tunnel would be. A lot of data collected, and we got privy to a sad love story, and I will spare you the details, but there's a lot of documentation to show that this really is an area where not only the wildlife is impacted by not being able to make it safely, but it's also a public safety, because we're all geared to swerve when we see this. So a lot of benefits to this project. The next one was implemented by the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. This was a $350,000 project, and this was for an HOV lane off Interstate 80. They expanded that. There were some unforeseen sediment caused by this, and so they went in and did a culvert retrofit. What they did is they created a fish passage that allowed both amphibians and I think it's the steelhead to have access to an additional 6 miles of upstream habitat. Just a side note here, when they tell you to bring water boots, don't bring your mud boots. We had to walk in that creek, and mud boots are not the same as water boots. So we had a interesting trip there. The last one that I'll share with you is the City of Visalia. City of Visalia does a really good job with working on replacing trees. This was interstate expansion on Mooney Boulevard. They went from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, and a lot of mature trees were removed at that time. So this project funded 400 trees as well as the understory. I realized on my early morning flight this morning that I really didn't do a wrap-up statement for you, so I think I'll close with just stating that the motto in our office is we're building a healthier and more sustainable California, and we do that one project at a time. So I think the message here is that these projects that you award on an annual basis really help us to meet those goals and achieve those goals. And so in my most professional statement, I'll just tell you that it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Thank you.
So do we have questions, Commissioner Madaffer?
Thank you. Thank you, Polly. And, and I read the backup on this, and these are all great projects, and I'll be happy to make a motion to support it. The question I have is just something, and it's probably not in your wheelhouse, but it's an issue that comes up in my mind from time to time. We typically get lots of supplementals in here due to environmental issues and things, or projects end up costing more. And I'm just wondering, at what point does the Resources Agency ever provide any input to the legislature when new laws or rules are adopted that require additional environmental enhancements and things for highway construction projects? A lot of times it comes with no funding. and we end up finding ourselves having to allocate new money that wasn't anticipated, which then causes other projects to slip. And I'm just curious as to at what point would Secretary Laird or others provide some guidance to the legislature just to be mindful of those kind of rules or laws that get adopted to where perhaps there'd be a little bit more understanding or find the funding if they're going to make these new rules so we don't slip on these transportation projects.
Right. That is out of my wheelhouse, but, I will tell you what we try to do to help mitigate that within this program and some of our other programs. We have $76 million right now that we're in the middle of workshops for the cap and trade funds. And so we try to fold in a process where the environmental reviews are part of the grant process. We do cap it because these are capital improvement projects, and so certainly we want to see the bulk of the funds going into the project itself. But we do allow, and I think there are some other programs out there, we allow a process to help with those environmental reviews so that as these things come up, they can kind of work to solve and to seek other funding sources at that time.
I'll just leave you with this perspective. I think the gas tax in the state was last raised in '94 to around 18 cents a gallon, and then and since then, you have all these new environmental rules that and add on fuel efficiency. The tax is probably worth about 3 or 4 cents a gallon today, which is why we are fighting over crumbs a lot of times on some of these projects like we saw yesterday. So I just provide a perspective, at least from where I'm sitting, that a lot of times, and I love what you're doing, it's just that sometimes these new rules that get added on. So anytime you guys can help with that, to help us to find additional funding that go along with these new rules would be great.
Great. I will pass that along. Thank you.
Commissioner Arp?
So is there a cap or a budget that you work within, or the Resources Agency works within?
We get $7 million annually for this program. $6.7 million of it goes directly to projects. The $300,000 goes to administrative costs. The program came with it 2 full-time PYs. Plus, we also pay for accounting services, so that would be our max, $7 million. Some years, sir, we have more money than we have projects. That's a rarity, but every once in a while, you just are, there's not, people need more time to put their proposals together. Most years, we have more projects than we have money, so we do what we call a substitution list. Mm-hmm. And the list that's before you today, you've got, I think, 15 projects that we're recommending funding, 2 from the substitution list. So we can't exceed that. But if projects terminate, and we just had one up north that the willing seller, the deal fell through. And so those funds then are available to go to the next in line. There's been a few years where we've rolled the money forward if we didn't have enough good projects, and then we had, so I think one year we had $10 million to award, but never can we exceed that amount.
Yeah, we would call those Tier 2 projects, I think, in our nomenclature. And this money comes from the state highway account?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
It does.
Polly, I have a question for you. All of you mentioned a 60-40 split with 60 going to the south, yet all of your examples are from the north, so...
My boss pointed that out to me yesterday, and that's my fault. We had more examples, and I apologize, and when I asked it be streamlined, I didn't make it clear which ones to take out. And so we did have some other wonderful examples and of projects that we have. In fact, Koreatown is here in the audience today. They've been a very successful applicant. We have Amigos de los Rios. She's a gal here who works in Southern California, a nonprofit who works heavily with the county and city of Los Angeles, and they both work in underserved areas, heavy with the tree planting. We also had a Rancho Simi Valley acquisition project that was here as an example, which is another wildlife corridor. It's one where the grantee already has an easement in place with Caltrans to use the culvert, and so the acquisition helped protect the habitat from development so that there is a corridor. So I do apologize and take responsibility for what he thought was very obvious, but it was just a little bit late for me to fix it. Thank
Okay,
you.
so maybe you could just share some of those other examples with our staff, and we could take a look at those. Another question I have for you, we've all been told that we have millions of trees in California that are dead or dying. So have you changed your focus at all? You mentioned that you have urban forestry as one of your key areas, but it seems to me the externality of so many trees being removed from the landscape of California, maybe more priority goes on to reforesting?
We do have a heavy focus on reforesting, and what we're doing is we're asking people to look at the issues that they've had as to why are things dying. You know, that Southern California has a big issue with the beetles right now, right? The Whittier Narrows area, excuse me. I think they lost 400 trees in one season due to the beetle. So we do have an urban forester on our team who goes out and meets with these folks, and we talk about diversity, and we talk about what trees have the greatest chance of survival, and we do that. We also have, you bring up the trees with our new urban greening program. The trees is a heavy focus, and making sure that we're planting those things that are going to survive our next drought.
Okay. We do have some public comments on this. Could I ask Joe St. John to come forward?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm with the Koreatown Youth and Community Center. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I think we didn't make the slides because we work in a fully built urban environment. Our current project is to remove concrete in the industrial portion of downtown and to plant street trees to help with particulate matter. So you don't get the nice vistas with our projects. We're a community-based organization, multi-service, been around for over 40 years, and have been doing urban forestry since 1994. Since 2005, we've received 5 EEM grants and have planted over 2,500 street trees in disadvantaged communities in Los Angeles through this. The Environmental Enhancement and Mitigation Project allows us to leverage local funds and gives us a chance to work with local transportation agencies to coordinate on our common goals. The California Natural Resources Agency has been a great partner for the nonprofit since they've taken over this grant project, and they're responsible steward of this program. We encourage your continued support.
So who's responsible for the maintenance of these trees after you plant them?
One of the great things about, silver lining for the drought is that a lot of the state grants are now allowing us to include in our project maintenance funds or funds to help establish the trees. So for the first 2 to 3 years, the trees need a lot of attention and water, and then once they're established, then the watering is very minimal, if any. Usually the precipitation in Los Angeles can support the street trees. And then we're responsible for maintenance, and they also, if they're street trees, they go into the city asset, and the street services are responsible for pruning after, once they're established.
So your nonprofit actually does the maintenance for the first couple of years?
Yes, we're part of the City Plants program for the City of Los Angeles. So we partner with the Los Angeles Conservation Corps, Tree People, Northeast Trees, and Hollywood Beautification Team. And we get money from the DWP through the City of Los Angeles to be able to do street tree planting. That's our main leverage for these grants. And we do a lot of tree maintenance and establishment through those funds as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay, we have another public speaker. Tori, is it Kaiser? I'm sorry, I messed up your last name.
No, it's a hard last name. Chair, spelled Kjer.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Tori Chair. I'm with the Trust for Public Land. We're a national nonprofit that has been working in California for 40 years. And I'm just here to first thank you and congratulate you on a very successful grant program The Trust for Public Land has been a consistent applicant to the program and has successfully used the funding through the grant program to leverage and bring in millions of dollars to support land protection projects around the state. We actually have a project that just closed last week that was funded through this program. The total budget was $8.75 million. We received a $500,000 grant through this program, and we were able to protect 15 acres in Runyon Canyon Park here in the city of Los Angeles. Runyon Canyon Park is a regional park that receives over 2 million visitors a year. This was privately held property in a city park that included critical sections of trail. It was owned by developers, and it was a development, I think if we had not been able to protect it, was imminent. We also protected 27 acres in the city of Santa Barbara that was directly related to freeway improvements on the highway improvements on the 101 freeway. We were able to protect a historic site that was associated with mineral water bottling, as well as kind of critical open space within the city of Santa Barbara that also included sycamore and eucalyptus and other woodlands on the site. And why we think this program is so important and are just so impressed is that it really is just $7 million for the entire state, but what it actually does is go in and provide critical funding to leverage and bring in other funding to secure important acquisitions and properties that will protect that critical habitat. So we just want to thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. We have any questions for Troy?
Staff recommends your approval of the EM program for the fiscal year 2015-16.
I second Commissioner Mandaffer's resolution, or a motion. You did
Okay.
make a motion, didn't you?
That was kind of buried in the comment there. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Arp. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed?
Talking to Secretary Laird.
Thank you.
Anybody abstaining? No. Okay, hearing none.
By the way, excuse me, I'm sorry, Madam.
No, it's fine.
Would you also thank Secretary Laird as well for signing the Resource Protection Agreement on the SR 241? I mentioned it yesterday and thanked Caltrans, but in South Orange County, that was a pretty groundbreaking agreement and unusual, and both Secretary Resources Department and the Transportation Agency have both signed on. So major resource protection in South Orange County. So please convey our thanks as well for that.
I absolutely will.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move on to, let's see, we're up to 74.
Yes, Commissioners, item 74 is an action item. This is the financial allocation for the program you just approved. This is the $6.7 million for 15 projects included in the list that you just approved. The staff recommends your approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to item 75. Therese, you're up.
Item 75 is an action item. This is a program amendment to the Proposition 1B Intercity Rail Improvement Program. This amendment reduces the capital maintenance by $1 million and programs these funds to the North Coast Transit District left-hand turnout project in San Diego County. Staff recommends your approval.
So, second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Move on, item number 76.
Item 76 is an action item. This is the financial allocation of the $1 million you just approved for the North Coast Transit District left-hand turnout project in the Proposition 1B Intercity Rail Program. This project is ready to go, and it meets all the requirements of the program. Staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dunn, a second by Commissioner Madaffer. Any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 75, done. I'm sorry, 77, going the
77,
wrong
yes.
way.
So tab 77 is an action item for the allocation of the Route 71 project in Los Angeles County for $395 million. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 78, Dawn?
Item 78 is an action item for the TCRP allocation of 2 locally administered grade separation projects in San Bernardino County. Staff has reviewed the requests and recommends approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. We are going to skip for now item 79 and go to the action item of number 80, please.
Item 80 is a financial allocation request for projects in the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. There is a change to this book item included in your change list. Project 2 and 3 have been withdrawn. With that, staff recommends you approve the allocation of Project 1 and 4 for a total of $50,235,000. The projects are ready to proceed and have met all the requirements of the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Madaffer, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. We will now go to item 71, or 81. It's an action item. Well, it's action.
Change of chairs here.
I'm sorry, we have,
That's fine. Commissioners, tab 81 is an action item, and we have Chris Schmidt, the recently appointed chief of the Caltrans Division of Transportation Planning here, in place of Coco Briseño, is here today to provide an overview of the recently released and the first ever California, the statewide bicycle plan and pedestrian plan that was titled Toward an Active California. And I believe you have a copy and a link in your binder. Following Mr. Schmidt's presentation, staff is asking for your approval, and that's why this is an action item, on the comment letter that is attached to the book item. Basically, our comments recommend that Caltrans enhance this plan to acknowledge the role of regional and local agencies in the planning and development of active transportation facilities, and to also ensure that the 53 specific action items identified in the plan are achievable, and also to ensure the plan will address the needs of all community members and also serves as a useful information tool for Caltrans and other potential stakeholders. After the Caltrans presentation, staff recommends your approval to transmit the attached letter. With that, Chris?
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to present this item to you today. I'm here to talk about Active California, our new plan for bicycle and pedestrian improvements in the state. And I just want to highlight a few things through the presentation. Just real quick, this is one of the modal plans that's supporting the overall California transportation plan, and it's really the first transportation plan of this nature for this mode for California. It was identified as part of the 2012 Caltrans program review, as well as part of our overall Complete Streets Action Plan, that there's a need for an overall overarching plan for the state. It's also part of our strategic management plan. There's a goal in there specifically to triple bicycle, double pedestrian, and double transit mode share over time. And it is part of our mission to support overall active transportation. The main objective of this plan really is to develop a visionary comprehensive policy document. It's really intended as a policy plan to support active modes of transportation and create a framework to increase safe bicycling and walking. And there is a strong need for this. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to triple mode share here. And as you can see on our slide, we have basically in 2010 to 2012 about 1.5% mode share for bicycling. We're trying to get that up to 4.5%. In the case of walking, we're currently roughly in the 16% range, We're hoping to get that to about 33%. So that's part of the goal. It's pretty ambitious to try to do that by 2020, but as you're aware, there are a number of active transportation funding programs as well as efforts underway at the local and regional level to achieve that. So we hope that that's an achievable target. The benefits are many. Amongst those are really the fact that active living leads to great health outcomes. This creates really an opportunity to folks to walk, to bike, to act and live a more healthy lifestyle. That's going to increase overall physical activity levels. That leads to reduced costs in overall healthcare costs, and also reduces overall emissions from our overall transportation system, which is good for greenhouse gas emission reduction purposes. The plan really focuses on a number of things, and it is a Caltrans-focused plan, but it does really recognize the role of both Caltrans as well as local and regional partners to implement projects and policies to make bicycling pedestrian activity more viable. It's not intended to replace existing policy or local efforts that are already underway, and it's not a list of projects either. And I know we've had some concerns about, where's the list of projects? Why don't you have projects in here? And I can speak to that a little bit further here later on. It was guided by a significant amount of participation from a policy advisory committee and a technical advisory committee, and I want to thank those folks. They spent a lot of time with us to really provide input. We held a number of focus groups. We had a lot of regional forums, webinars, online engagement, and have gotten quite a number of comments on the plan as well. We used a steering committee that really looked at the policy level issues, and then a technical advisory committee comprised of 50 different member organizations that really are the kind of folks that are advocating for these modes and are very deeply embedded in the concerns raised about really making both bicycling and walking a more viable mode of transportation in the state. With that in mind, we did a lot of public outreach to make sure we really heard from users and community members. We did that through, as I mentioned earlier, some regional forums. We did some online service. We did workshops, did tribal listening sessions, and did a number of questionnaires, et cetera. So that vision that we've developed as a result of all of that engagement is really that by 2040 that the people of California of all ages, abilities, and incomes can safely, conveniently, and comfortably walk and bike for their transportation needs. And that's ambitious insofar as that it today is not as viable as it could be, and so is a challenge, especially when we think about making that viable for all ages and all abilities, including income levels as well in terms of disadvantaged communities that have perhaps been underserved traditionally. So the plan objectives really speaks to 4 primary focus areas that were identified through the outreach process: safety, mobility, preservation, and social equity. Safety, as you might imagine, is a paramount concern here in terms of reducing the number and severity of bicycle and pedestrian incidences. Mobility in terms of making it more viable to walk and bike. That requires some facilities, but some other treatments as well that even when there are good facilities in place, we need to make sure that they're maintained well. That's what the preservation piece speaks to, making sure that the active transportation infrastructure is actually well maintained, that it's functional and usable for all users. And then the overarching issue of social equity to make sure that these treatments are being done in a socially responsible manner within communities that have perhaps been underserved traditionally. There are a number of safety strategies. I'll just highlight those quickly here. Education, lots of need for education. Maybe it seems somewhat evident, but many of us who are slightly older may have actually had some bicycle pedestrian training when we were children in school. Some of those programs have been extremely effective, and they've been funded by the Commission as well through the ATP program. Those need to continue. They're very, very important to get really kids early on to understand these modes. We need safer streets and crossings. Incidents occur all the time. Lots of conflict areas is really where we're trying to target those investments. We need more safety data. We don't necessarily know exactly where some of those instances occur. So in terms of guiding investments and try to where to intervene and where the greatest needs are, we need data, and we don't really have enough of that. And on the enforcement side, it's pretty clear that we need to both enforce existing laws and make sure that folks are really trained on understanding what the laws are in terms of how to operate a motor vehicle in mixed-use traffic, as well as how to be a safe and responsible bicyclist and a pedestrian as well. On the mobility side, I'll just run through these real quick. We need more connected, comfortable networks where people are actually comfortable, walking and biking. Lots of folks want to bike, but they want to do it in safe conditions. And in mixed-use traffic, that's often a challenge. We need multimodal access to transit. First mile, last mile issues are very, very important to make these modes increasingly viable. And it requires good land use. If you build land uses that you can't walk and bike in and you can't access transit in, folks are simply not going to be able to utilize these modes. We need more network and travel data. Lots of folks see gaps in the system. We need to establish where those gaps are and how to fund those and prioritize those. We also have a need for some statewide facilities. There's been a lot of emphasis on that in the California Coastal Trail. We also have national engagement in that regard in terms of cross-country type trail facilities. And then overall, we need some encouragement programs. The health benefits really are a very powerful argument for people to be more active living. We need to make sure folks really understand the value of being more active. And then the preservation strategies. This is really all about the fix-it-first strategy we typically apply to most of our project. Quality of conditions, if sidewalks have cracks and they're not safe to walk on, they're not well-maintained, folks don't want to use facilities like that. And we need to integrate our programs, make sure that when we're fixing some part of the infrastructure, that we're really fixing all of the infrastructure. Social equity strategies are the community support. We've seen a lot of people reaching out, as you've seen through the active transportation program, the kinds of submittals that you get. Lots of communities want these kinds of investments and these opportunities in their community. There's really a lot of grassroots emphasis here. The equity lens is really taking a look at that we're doing this in a very socially responsible way. Are we serving all people in all communities? And providing access and assistance and seeking out funding and funding opportunities for those that perhaps have not done so in the past. Implementation, we're going to be focusing on infrastructure. While the plan doesn't call for any particular infrastructure improvements, we really do need to identify where there's infrastructure gaps and how to do that. The other one that we want to focus on, education and training. There's professional training development needs. More staff need to be more well-versed in how to really provide for these two modes. We've done a pretty good job as Caltrans designing for the motorized public. We need to do an equally good job doing that for the non-motorized public. We need additional planning in terms of where to focus our attention, in terms of where the greatest needs are, where the gaps in the system are, and we need some data. We may need to develop that data by creating additional count stations. We may even need to purchase third-party data. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to do additional staff development. We need to be as good at providing for non-motorized traveling public as we are for the motorized public, and that does require some dedicated staff. We do maintain this website called bikepedplan.org. We intend to have that as a resource for others to steer to and have the latest best practices available there. So we don't see this as a one-time endeavor, as a single plan, but we really see this as a long-term process where we make that kind of material available to everyone. And recognizing too that, as Caltrans, we're not the only ones designing or building new facilities. The regional agencies are doing that, local agencies are doing this, and a lot of the walking and biking really doesn't take place on the state highway system, right? It really takes place on the local network. We want to be leaders and supporters of how to make that possible within those local communities. With that, we hope to finalize the plan here in April. The public comment period, and your comments included, will be processed and amending the plan accordingly. And then we hope to develop an implementation plan to really take all those actions we've identified and bring those forward. We want to adopt a plan in celebration of Bike Month here in May, and really, move forward in terms of implementing the plan in the future. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Burke?
I'd just like to ask a question about the data. My impression, just watching the news, is that there's an increase in pedestrian injuries. Is that true, or is that just that there's greater attention to pedestrian incidents? And what is the analysis in terms of, if it is true, what's the analysis of the basis and reason for that increase?
So there's a couple of things. The data basically shows that pedestrian incidents are pretty flat, has not increased over the last few years. However, I will say that in certain locations, they may in fact be increasing. Part of that is as more people go out and walk and are more active, the exposure rates do increase, and with that, incident rates can increase as well. A number of communities, and I think Caltrans committed to this as well, is try to identify those key locations where there's a higher incident rate and try to see what countermeasures can be taken to address that.
I know that a couple of those that I have heard about, even involving some of our project areas, are people who are texting or have earphones. Is there any information or indication that that has been one of the causes for him?
I don't know that.
You say there hasn't been an increase.
Yeah.
But has there been an impact from use of people texting and having earphones on? I know in terms of railroad crossings, I know of one particular case of where people were screaming at the person to get out of the way of the train, and they never heard it. And I just wonder if there is any analysis of that, or is this just in terms of the fact that the media plays up those cases?
I think that is one of the data gaps. So I think our friends at CHP would tell us that yes, distracted driving and people, listening to things on earphones or texting and really not paying attention, that is a problem. And it's a problem for all modes. And there's also all sorts of related issues. For example, would you believe there's drunken bicycle riding? Right, so I mean, there's a lot of these kinds of things, and I think there is a need for that education, that being a pedestrian also requires you to be a smart roadway user. That means understanding how crosswalk signal works, understanding how the traffic flows. That means you look in both directions before you step in the street. And when you're wearing your headphones, when you're texting, you're not paying attention to what's happening, just watching the little man turn on doesn't mean it's time to step into the street. So I agree. I think we need more information, though, to really understand, is it a distracted issue, and is that something we need to reach out on and educate people a little bit more on, or is it something else that's happening as well?
Commissioner Dunn?
Just a note from me. Thank you for your presentation very much. We never really saw a hard copy of this plan. It was just a link. And so it would be helpful in the future that we get a hard copy to review. The Caltrans staff report didn't accommodate that. And because the other thing I'm always going to start looking for, and it's based actually on Caltrans data, is that bike lanes or bike projects overwhelmingly are used by men. And I really want to see an effort to accommodate and figure out how to encourage more women or take care of their concerns with an effort more than social equity and disadvantaged communities. But to meet the mission, it just can't be overwhelmingly a man's field. And so I would just encourage that.
Sure, I hear you there. And the data shows that women are as interested in biking as men are, but you're absolutely correct. The overwhelming number of current users are men, and there are specific reasons for that. And I think a big part of that has to do with safety and security and having the right type of facilities for users.
So it would seem to me you'd have something in your plan recognizing that and addressing that.
We can certainly have some discussion in the plan about that, yes.
Do you need a motion to, accept
Approve
the
letter?
letter?
The letter, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Dunn. I just had one question. You mentioned that you need to have more data, but do you differentiate between recreational, or I'll call it wellness activities versus actual getting to school, getting to work?
Yes, so there's, trip purpose in terms of trip to work, trip to school versus recreational. The facilities we tend to see on the road serve all users for all trip purposes. We don't differentiate that on other transportation modes either. We do try to gather data on that. It's a little bit difficult. There are, metadata is available that are largely recreational, user-based. That gives us some indication that there are a lot of people biking and walking for recreational purposes. But a lot of the trip data that we do get is from community household surveys, and you can identify what the nature of the trip is. So we do that through the census type household survey that we do. We oversampled in California specifically, and that's actually the data that we've been using. And you can differentiate the trip purpose.
And do you differentiate in your plan, your vision for folks that are dependent on this for getting to school or getting to work versus folks that are dependent on it for recreation?
I think in general, the transportation dollars that have been spent have generally been focused on more that trip purpose that is school and work related.
Okay.
But there's clearly an opportunity to also provide ultimately recreational facilities where a lot of the trail-type facilities that provide that utilitarian trip connection can also be used for recreational purposes. So it does some of both, but I think generally the projects have been prioritized or been identified as providing that utilitarian trip.
Okay. 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 We have a motion. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Moving on, we'll go to item 82.
Commissioners, item 82 is an action item to consider the project scope change request for the County of Fresno Riverdale Path Bikeway project. This is a first cycle ATP project with the total ATP funds of $503,000. This project has a lot of different elements to it, including installing digital radar display units, curb, gutter, and sidewalks, and a pedestrian bridge. The proposed scope amendment will remove an asphalt walkway along the Statham Road. This is necessary because during the design phase, it was determined that constructing this walkway as originally scoped would have caused severe flooding to adjacent properties. The walkway that is proposed to be removed amounts to about 10% of the overall costs. The more significant aspects of the project in terms of benefits, such as the pedestrian bridge, will remain. Caltrans staff performed a field review of the project on February 21st, 2017 to better understand the original scope and the proposed scope change. Staff concluded that if the asphalt walkway was not in the original application, it would not have affected the project score. Staff recommends approving the scope change request. Additionally, staff recommends that the commission direct the county to review the pavement markings and school area signage on Statham Road and update them to current standards.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Moving on, item 83.
Commissioners, items 83 and 84, those are ATP allocations. Staff has reviewed these requests. They are consistent with the ATP guidelines and the adopted program, so staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dunn, a second by Commissioner Arp. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 86 or 85?
85, these are ATP advance allocations. Staff has reviewed these requests. They are consistent with ATP guidelines and the approved program. Staff recommends your approval.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Item 86, Rick.
Commissioners, item 86 is an action item to extend the period of contract award for 9 SHOP projects. Staff has reviewed the request and makes the following recommendations. Projects 1, 2, and 6 are recently awarded, therefore an extension is not needed. Staff recommends a 6-month extension on projects 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. Staff recommends your approval.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Item 87.
Agenda item 87 is an action item. This is a 14-month time extension request for a contract award for a locally administered STIP project. Staff has reviewed this time extension request and finds it reasonable, and staff recommends your approval.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. Item 88.
Commissioners, this item 88 are requests for time extension for contract award for 3 ATP projects. Staff has reviewed these extension requests and recommends their approval.
Move.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Arp. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Item 89, please.
Okay, Commissioners, this is an action item and actually has two parts to it. The first part is to rescind a contract award time extension for 3 months for the Cross Alameda Trail Project in Alameda County that the Commission approved at the December meeting. And then the second part is to approve a 6-month time extension that would replace that 3-month time extension, and that would be from December. The Cross Alameda Trail is programmed for about $2 million in construction in 15-16. The City of Alameda received an allocation for construction in May of 2016. Pursuant to the ATP guidelines, the city had until the end of November 2016 to award the construction contract. In October, the city submitted a request to Caltrans for a 3-month extension that was to be heard at the December commission meeting. In November, the city revised the request to 6 months. Caltrans in error did not forward the 6-month request prior to the December commission meeting, so the commission approved the 3-month extension. Staff concluded that the city should not be punished because Caltrans did not properly process the extension request. Therefore, we recommend rescinding the 3-month extension and approving the 6-month extension. However, then in January, the city requested a 9-month extension because they had some issues with getting their project into the FTIP. And so Commission staff is not recommending the approval of the 9-month because the third request was received both after the deadline for contract award in November and after the Commission approval of the extension request in December. Staff concluded that approving a change to the period of extension after both the deadline for contract award and a prior Commission action sets a poor precedence in a program that has struggled with project delivery.
Okay, we have some speakers on this item, please. Amy Woolridge, City of Alameda.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Amy Woolridge. I'm the Recreation and Parks Director for the City of Alameda, and I am asking that you consider adding the 3 months for a total of 9 months to the extension request for this project. I very much understand and appreciate that the CTC staff and Commission manage a large number of projects, and I understand the need to follow set deadlines and procedures to manage this volume. I also know from my own management experience that there are times when other factors occur that are outside of our control and need to be addressed. In our case, there have been extenuating circumstances that led to this 9-month extension request. And I also want to recognize that just yesterday, we received all of our federal approvals that were holding us up, and we are now ready to go out to bid next week and get this trail built. I want to personally thank the MTC staff and the Caltrans Local Assistance District 4. They really worked hard to support this project and expedite the state and federal approvals that were holding us up. However, it's still a tight schedule for us to go out to bid and award contract by May 30th, and I'm asking for some additional time to help give us room just to make sure we have room and time to manage any circumstances that can arise in a bid process, such as unresponsive bids or a lack of enough qualified bidders. As a really brief background to explain the extenuating circumstances this got us here, it's a Rails to Trails project. It's a redevelopment of old railroad switching and maintenance yards, so you can imagine there's some pretty yucky soil there. And so we did a solid soil management plan, worked with DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substance Control. That approval process during design took a year longer than DTSC originally anticipated, really due to the project complexities and their small staff, which would often take 3-4 months for us to get a response back to our draft documents. So we were ready to go out to bid last fall and submitted our paperwork for the E76 along with the 3-month extension. Once we submitted the 3-month extension, the Caltrans staff came back to us and said they recommended to us a 6-month extension due to the time that it takes to get the E76 approval. So we immediately revised our extension, which is why we moved it from the 3 to the 6 month. It was based on their recommendation. And while that 6-month extension was being processed, at the same time we realized that our project was not included in the FTIP. Caltrans headquarters has been ready to issue our E76 since January, but they couldn't do so because it was not in the FTIP. So again, Caltrans staff and MTC staff worked hard with us to amend the FTIP. That is now, and did an expedited process. That's now done and ready, and we are ready to go out to bid next week. So again, I ask you to add some time to our project now that we know as of yesterday that we have all our approvals, and we may not need the full 3 months, but even an additional couple months will help us make sure that, you know, the 2 months, really a good bid process requires at least 2 months. And if there's any hiccups, then we want to make sure this is a successful project, and we're ready to move it forward. So I thank you for your consideration and ask you to take this opportunity to help us move the project forward. It's a great off-street bicycle pedestrian trail and falls exactly in line with what you were just discussing earlier to increase bicycle pedestrian active transportation. It's a segment of a longer trail that will be a commuter trail to span the whole length of our city. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Gometti?
Madam Chair, so you have, everything's clear, you're ready to go to bid tomorrow, correct?
Yes, next week, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't understand why you need 9 months to bid it out.
I don't. Our November 30th was our deadline, but due to these bureaucratic hiccups.
No, I understand all your little, I understand Caltrans.
Right, but it's 9 months from the November 30th. It's not 9 months as of from today.
It still takes you.
Right, so the 6 month puts us at May 30th deadline to award contract.
So you only have between now and May 30th?
May 30th with a 6 month
extension?
extension, that's correct.
So why did staff recommend, I'm confused.
I think my understanding, can I just jump in here real quick? We've been pretty hardline on making sure these projects are delivered, and I think that because I asked about this project myself, and my understanding is that in order to, you're basically you've set a policy that adheres to what the mandate we've given you overall. So the 6 month has been basically what everyone has been told. You may get a 6 month extension if you do this, this, and this. In my view, after looking at this, and I support that, I absolutely support that overall. In this particular situation, looking at some of the things that have come up that were beyond their control, and I think you've got some federal approval or money that is hanging out there on this project. Is that true?
This project is through the Active Transportation Program and is federally funded.
I would be supportive in this one instance of giving them that extra little time so this project can get through, because it's a good project. But I don't think anyone out there should get the idea that, at least me as a commissioner, is going to be looking at, all kinds of exceptions to the rule down the road.
Right.
This one here had some really exceptional things beyond their control, and I think that we should just cut them some slack for a couple months. So that's a motion, I guess.
Can we pick a date that it has to be?
Whoop.
There you go, you fell down.
Oh, I withdraw my motion. No.
We do have some more public speakers, so I don't know if you want to do a motion before we hear public speakers.
If they're just asking for more, okay, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we, I believe we have the mayor here. Trish Herrera Spencer, so I want to recognize she made the trip down.
Thank you, commissioners, and honestly, right, if you're going to give us the 9 months, we're very happy and appreciative, and we do also have a couple of people here from our community. This is a very important project to our community and the region, and we all love bike trails. It's actually one of those projects that you would have never thought would even happen, right? It used to be a railroad, and it's really all of us working together, all the agencies, our community members, that we've gotten this far. And we would truly, appreciate any additional time you could give us. And I want to commend our staff and all of you working together to get us this far. So we humbly request this and look forward to your support. Thank you.
Okay, we have Jim Sweeney and Dorothy Freeman. So if you have something new to add, we'd appreciate that, but if not, concur with the others.
Good morning, Commissioners. A pleasure to be here before you. I'll make this as brief as I can. I'm Jim Sweeney, a board member of the Gene Sweeney Open Space Park Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit formed to assist the City of Alameda with the development of the park. A brief background. This 27-acre park was made possible because of the inspiration, determination, courage, and tenacious research of Gene Sweeney, who in 1999 found the 1924 contract between the City of Alameda and the Beltline Railroad, which allowed the city to purchase the Beltline at the original price of $30,000 plus improvements. Gene's dream was that it would become an open space public park. The citizens of Alameda are ecstatic in their support of the park. Our fund has planned and already obtained payment from individuals for 13 benches to be placed in the park. A great number of citizens and several groups closely follow the process of the park's development and regularly ask for how they can help. The Rotary Club has committed to building the park's picnic pavilion, and the Kiwanis Club will build a rustic playground. It has taken 18 years of dedicated effort by many people to get where we are today, seeking the Commission's approval of the city's request for an additional 3 months extension to obtain the funding for the Alameda section of the Cross Bike Alameda Trail, which will be located within the park and will hasten the development of the remainder of the park. And, of course, will provide alternative transportation for the island of the park segment of the trail. This will include thousands of houses and businesses nearby, and the old Naval Air Station property, which is also nearby. So there's quite a segment out there that needs this park. I ride my bicycle throughout Alameda and look forward, as do the members of the Bike Alameda organization and the public at large, to riding and walking the wonderful trail which is planned for, and for it helping to get people out of their cars and improving our transportation system in Alameda. Time is of the essence for us. Thank you for your consideration of this necessary request. Thank you.
Thank you. Dorothy Freeman? And Dorothy, are you representing the same organization?
Yes, I am. And I just wanted to say that I do concur with everything that's been said. To keep things short, I just would like to say this trail is very, very important to Alameda. And from the map that I gave you, you can see how strategic it is to the island, and we appreciate an extension if you can give that to us very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a quick question. How much time do you need to reasonably get this done sometime between November 30th, which was the beginning of the clock for 9 months, and what you're asking? What do you really need?
I would say a
here?
total of 8 months will put us to the end of July, and that would be more than sufficient for anything that might happen in the bid process. We still plan to accomplish this by May 30th, if at all possible.
Okay, so you're talking July, what was it?
July 30th, end of July 30th, which is a total of 8 months.
Okay, so can I put that in the motion then? We just give them that date? That's within the time frame that it's less than 9 months.
It's less than 9 months, but more than 6.
But more than 6.
Well, I have a question in terms of, it's amazing to me how long things take, and then when we put the pressure on how we can get things done. So this is the middle of March for all practical purposes. You're ready to go to bid. So isn't it conceivable that you could get it done within the 6-month extension?
It is conceivable, since we got the expedited approvals. If anything, it generally takes 3+ months to go out to bid. When you have to be out to bid for 3 to 4 weeks, it takes a week to get it into the newspaper. We have a 12-day public noticing for our city council. That's why it feels like a long time, and that's why it adds up. So it would be tight if anything happened in the bid process, such as we had to rebid, or which does happen in bid processes sometimes.
But
that
if-
would not. allow
Excuse
for
me, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. No, but I mean, to me, if we kept the pressure on with the 6-month and we meet again in May, if you're in a pickle in May, we could take that action, right? I'm just wondering if
My understanding from staff is not, that this is a one-time only thing, that we can't come, if we don't make it by May, then the project's done.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Well, because then if we heard it again in May, then it would really be like another time extension. This one, we're rescinding the 6-month.
So you're not going to count the
3
month?
month.
Okay.
And then, so we could do the 6-month, 7-month, 8 months. So but if we waited again, then it would be, I think, even more.
It'd be messier than it is now.
Okay.
So we have a motion by Mr.
My motion is that we give them until the the end of July to get this done.
Second.
A second.
Okay, I think, so the motion was made by Commissioner Arp and seconded by Commissioner Dunn?
Or
Or Gilmetti, seconded by Gilmetti. And that is to extend the time, the extension to July 31st, 2017. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Okay, item number 90, Teresa?
Agenda item 90 is an action item. This is a time extension request for project development expenditure deadline for a locally administered STIP project. Staff has reviewed this time extension and finds it reasonable, and staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Okay, now we're going to go back to item number 61, please.
Yes, Commissioners, tab 61 is an information item, and we're fortunate to have Mr. Stephen Keck, who's the Caltrans Acting Chief of the Division of Rail and Mass Transportation here, wearing his different hat today. And he'll be providing an overview of the yet-to-be-released 2018 California State Rail Plan. And the 2018 State Rail Plan fulfills federal and state requirements for the development of a statewide rail plan, and also presents a vision and strategies for California's future passenger and freight rail network. The draft plan has not yet been released by Caltrans. We anticipate and understand that it'll be released next month, as I'm sure Mr. Keck will allude to. And Commission staff anticipates that we'll be able to comment on, provide a comment letter for your review at the May Commission meeting on comments on this specific rail plan. And with that, Mr. Keck.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair and Commissioner. Stephen Keck with Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transportation today. So first I want to address the reason why I'm presenting this to you prior to the release of the actual rail plan, the draft rail plan in April. So when we release that plan, we're starting a 60-day comment period, review and comment period, and I thought it would be more useful for me to give a preview of the report of the plan now than it would be for me to come in May, halfway through the comment period, and having you see it for the first time from Caltrans.
How refreshing.
I don't want to start a trend or anything, but it worked out pretty well in this instance. So with regard to the state rail plan, it's a bit of a different plan than what you would see for something like streets and roads or highways, because most of the infrastructure that we're talking about is not owned by public agencies. So this really required us to put together a very broad stakeholder group that included the private owners of the rail systems. It included metropolitan planning organizations, operators such as Amtrak and Metrolink, and dealing also with transit operators and bus operators as well. So we had a huge working group to put this together. And similar to what was talked about earlier with the active transportation plan, the rail plan is really developed under the broad guidance of the CTP 2040, which sets this long-term vision for transportation in California. This, of course, focusing on rail. This plan is coordinated with several other plans. It takes cues from the Sustainable Freight Action Plan. It obviously is integrated with the High-Speed Rail Business Plan that was adopted in 2016. And it will help provide information moving forward for the California Freight Mobility Plan. So all of these plans, which are required by different sections of law and different mandates, are integrated together so they're not operating on their own. So in particular, the rail plan is required by two different laws, a federal law, the Passenger Rail Investment and Improvement Act, which requires a short-term investment plan with actual projects, and a long-term vision plan. It also requires Caltrans to look at the impacts of the proposed projects. AB 528 is a state law dealing with the rail plan, and it requires a 10-year capital plan of projects. And it requires the department in the plan to address passenger rail network integration. That is, of course, high-speed rail with intercity rail and regional rail, and to really put together a complete system for the state. In developing the plan, we're really focused vision-wise on meeting customer expectations, both with freight and with passenger rail. We're looking at simple things we can do, like synchronizing timetables to increase the efficiency of the existing system. And without a doubt, one of the most important things is looking at integrating mobility between buses, light rail, regional transit, regional rail, commuter rail, and intercity rail, and high-speed rail. A lot of effort goes into that because I think that's where we make the best benefits for the traveling public. It's going to require co-opetition. It's a word I had to look up earlier this week. Co-opetition is a portmanteau of cooperation and competition. It's basically when companies who are normally competitors work together to solve a universal problem. So I don't think there's a better word for dealing with freight and passenger rail systems that use the same physical network. It also requires strategic planning, which of course this is the first step in doing that, and a consensus vision. And I talked about a huge stakeholder group that we brought together and developing this rail plan vision to have a premier customer-focused integrated rail system that successfully moves people and products while enhancing the growth and quality of life in California. Very similar to the department's mission as well, and I don't think that's an accident. But I think in terms of the vision for the 2040 rail plan, or we're looking out to the 2040 horizon, it's a ambitious but doable vision. Kind of focusing a little bit more on the vision in terms of network goals. The vision of the plan is to connect California communities. We want to be able to reach 90% of residents in the state. We want to develop emerging regional rail networks to provide inflow into these transit hubs we talked about, and getting folks to the intercity rail and high-speed rail systems. Obviously, we're encouraging mode share shift. We want to get more folks onto trains and more freight onto trains as well. We want to increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of our existing systems. In other words, we want to get the most bang for our buck for our investments. We want to utilize the existing physical infrastructure in better ways. That includes more efficient timetables, higher frequencies of trains. And by bringing more folks onto the system and increasing the frequency of our services, both on the freight side and on the passenger side, we can have more freight or more passengers moved at a lower cost, which of course can bring down subsidies. So when we look at the key features of the vision, we're really looking at an integrated statewide network, high-speed rail, express and local services, and integrated bus services. Because of course, if our goal is to reach most of the traveling public, we can't do it all with trains. We need to also look at integrated bus services. A big focus, as I mentioned before, is these multimodal connection points. Absolutely essential to get folks using different modes of travel connected in with the with the rail systems. And we want to make it auto and air competitive. I think this slide best shows where this vision gets us. It basically shows 4 medium to long trips in California and what that would take under the current situation for driving, which is the red, very unpleasant column there. What the current situation is for flights, which of course includes security and other wonderful hassles. And the green bar is what this 2040 plan would accomplish in terms of traveling between these areas. In most cases, it's comparable to flying, and in every case, it's much better than driving, and frankly, a much more pleasant experience than driving as well. So when we're looking at the freight side, we're looking at opportunities for trade corridor investments, for economic development and short lines to assist upgrade of physical infrastructure. Grade crossing improvements for both safety and efficiency when we're talking about roads and rail meeting. Increasing terminal and yard capacity for efficient use of the capacity on the freight system and a little bit of flexibility there. And also looking into short haul services, which is a situation where you might use a train to move goods out of a port inland, which would help relieve congestion on some of the roads in the ports and just around the ports. It's a sort of it's an old system of doing things, but it's something that bears looking at, and there's renewed interest in that area as well. So in developing the rail plan, we have this unique opportunity where we have different requirements for different touch points. So the federal law requires this near-term plan of 2022 and a longer-term vision of 2040, which slots in nicely with our CTP 2040 plan. And we have a state law that requires that mid-year, 10-year look as well. So the way we went about developing this is to look at where we are now and where we're going to be in 5 years. These are projects that are already underway or planned. Then we're looking at where we need to be in 2040 and looking backwards, right? So we know where we need to be in 2040. It's going to require significant investment and political will. What can we do in the meantime on this 10-year horizon that always moves us towards that 2040 vision, but isn't necessarily reliant on new funding at all? So the near-term 2022 plan and the mid-term 2027 plan are both doable within existing resources. The 2040 vision requires additional investment. So again, when we're talking about our investment strategy, we're tailoring our investments to market demand, both on the rail and passenger side. We want to maximize the shared corridor benefits. This is when freight and passengers use the same physical infrastructure. We want to avoid building redundant infrastructure. We have limited funding. We don't need to build rails where there's already rails. And we want to minimize temporary investments. So we don't, if we're going to put our money into something, we want to make sure that we're not going to come along 5 years later and redo everything. So these next 2 slides are really some of the specifics about what we're looking at for passenger network and for the freight network. I'll try to go over them quickly. In the short term, it's mostly things that are already planned and underway. In the midterm for passenger network, we're looking at integration of high-speed rail phase 1, which will be complete in the midterm. We're looking at completing connectivity improvements, again, moving folks into hubs and onto longer interregional rail systems. And we're looking at fully developing integrated ticketing for riders so that they can have one ticket for a ride instead of multiple, making it much easier to book and get onto these trains. For the 2040 vision, and this is the one that will require more funding and more political effort, we're looking at completion of high-speed rail phase 2. We're looking at actually making investments, expanding the network capacity in partnership with our freight partners as well. And we're looking at fully integrating the regional rail networks, again, to pull people into high-speed rail and intercity rail hubs. On the freight side, in the short term, safety is always number one. I should have put that as number one bullet. But we're also looking at really inexpensive fixes to existing rail bottlenecks, where a short siding, for example, might increase flow on a specific line. These are things that we can do that are just bottlenecks and to free up considerable amount of capacity. And again, this is within established funding sources. For the midterm, we're really looking at expansion of freight capacity through some of our freight programs that are coming online, and investing again in these shared corridors between passenger rail and freight. In the long-term vision, again, more trade corridor improvements with new funding coming along, knock on wood. And again, shared corridor expansion, leveraging our own dollars with private dollars, and fully developing interregional transportation corridors where we see heavy traffic, truck traffic. Let's get it off onto the rails and free up highway capacity as well as moving freight efficiently with rail. That's a lot of talking I've done, and so you might be interested, what does this actually get us? So this chart is impossible to read, so don't try. Each of these little boxes in this column is a county. And what this chart shows is travel between counties in the base year, and this is travel between counties on rail, in the base year on the left-hand side and in green, and travel, what it would look like in 2040 if we didn't do anything, no additional investments. So you see very slow growth in travel on rail, and really not an expansion to different areas. If we implemented the vision outlined in the 2040 plan as part of the rail plan, this is what it looks like. So it's the same chart, base year on the left. On the right-hand side is what the passenger travel would look like with a fully integrated network. So this is integrating regional rail, bus routes, mass transit, and high-speed rail. You're basically looking at, for the passenger side, an 8 times greater growth in ridership, reaching out to different counties that haven't been touched before, and really expanding the role of rail transportation in the state. So that's kind of what it gets us. So the next slides and wrap up is really talking about where we go from here. As I mentioned on the outset, we'll be releasing this plan in April for a 60-day public review and comment period. We've developed an online portal for folks to go and make comments on the plan directly, or we can also receive comments in traditional ways, such as public meetings, email and mail. We are holding 7 public meetings up and down the state, including at least one webcast for folks who can't travel to the public meetings. And we are, of course, consulting with our Native American tribes. So in terms of the schedule, obviously we are where we are today in March, having just about ready to release the draft. Begins the 60-day period. We'll be making revisions and incorporating comments on the draft as we move into the fall and winter. And we expect to have a final plan for review in September, and eventually out to the legislature in the winter of 2017 or spring of 18. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions with the caveat that the plan has not been released yet, and also the admission that I know far less about rail than I do about financing.
Commissioner Burke.
Obviously, this is not a great day for me to talk about this in view of what potentially looks like will be the role of the federal contribution in terms of long-distance rail. That it would probably be diminished substantially. I would, in addition to that, high-speed rail, a couple of the actions that have taken place and the indications. So I do hope that we look at, as you bring this up to date and you reflect the federal contributions and whether or not there will in fact be some of these rail lines that have been anticipated by your report, that you look at alternatives. And that by this time, the May financials should be available so that we know if there's no Amtrak long distance at all in California. So I do think that it would be very helpful if we see the various alternatives and exactly how we approach those alternatives. I think there's going to have to be a greater emphasis on state-supported from the state point of view. And that will probably be the only way we're going to have cross-country rail transit. So I would hope that we can work with our partners in Oregon and Washington in the future, as well as some others, to see how we can encourage some kind of a state-supported system that makes it possible for people to travel across country.
That's by our Amtrak board member, who is also our commissioner. Commissioner Dunn.
Thanks, Stephen. I find it fascinating that your presentation followed the Hyperloop 1 presentation.
Yes.
And so that would have been a nice connection of the dots. I would encourage a chapter. It's fascinating. He didn't want to be disruptive, was his presentation, because he's trying to work with government, and yet he's got a project that they're talking about started that couldn't be more disruptive to a 2040 vision, especially if he's going to kick something off starting in 2021, which is even before your short-term plan. Is visualized. So I'm wondering if you shouldn't think about having a chapter or a page that talks about the visionary projects in the private sector that may upend everything that you're doing for 2040. Just so that you're not just looking here at 19th century technology, but actually saying, hey, we recognize we're trying to make the best of the investment we have now, but, oh, by the way, here's some stuff we're just going to detail. Here's some stuff that's out there that would require this be completely relooked at. So just another...
Right. Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Thanks.
A couple of things. One, Stephen, I admire you for writing a plan when you don't own the assets. That's not an easy task to do. So, question I have in terms of the target for 90% of the population, how did you get to that number? And I don't know if that's the right number, because the incremental cost of picking up 1 or 2% may just be prohibitive in the environment that Commissioner Burke is describing.
Sure, and I think what's important to note about the 90% is we're talking about the integrated network in total. So when I spoke briefly about bus services, light rail, all of those services, that's what we're talking about. I don't necessarily mean getting rail service to 90%, but the integrated network to 90% of the population.
But, I mean, to Commissioner Dunn's point, the shared economy has been a game changer.
Right.
For the last mile and the first mile, perhaps. So do you recognize the shared economy here? And maybe that's under your market disruption category.
Yeah.
But I do think, and then I think the big challenge you have is the 800-pounders here really are class ones that own the significant share of a lot of these assets. And if you look historically, our class ones have a very high capital reinvestment program. It's just how the class one rail industry works. I think it's 17% that they set aside every year. But yet if you trail historically where those investments have come on our two class ones, not so much here in California, and that's for a whole number of reasons. I know our BN partners have tried, but were unable. So I think that, I guess I really don't understand how we can encourage more of those private investments from those class ones to really be in alignment with your plan. And I know that they kind of hold a lot of their info in their, whatever your competitive, cooperative new word is. But I think you do have a tough job to figure out what a 2040 plan is going to.
Well, we have 2 whole months to ruminate on it, a rare treat. Since you will be presenting it.
That's right.
Okay, I think we're losing commissioners here. So, all righty, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you back making a presentation. So, okay, item 62. Eric, you're up.
Thank you, Commissioners. The Caltrans Cost Estimating Improvement Initiative is what this item is on. It relates to and is actually the continuation of the COS workload work group effort we headed up last year. Caltrans is working really hard to improve their cost estimating in order to be more efficient and effective. Commission staff is participating, but purely at a consulting level on this initiative. It's really driven by Caltrans and their federal partners. Jim Davis is here to present on this effort at a high level, and more details can be found in the materials that were provided to you. So, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jim Davis, Capital Outlay Support Program Manager with Caltrans. I'll make this brief. This is just a status of where we are on cost estimating, but it is an outgrowth from our COS Workload Forecast Group that's mentioned in the Commission's annual report. So you've seen a number of these slides before, so I'm not going to spend much detail on these, but in this estimating process, we are going to be looking at support costs for all four phases of the PNED, or the environmental phase, the design phase, the right-of-way phase, and construction phase. We're going to be looking at construction capital dollars and how we do a better job estimating there. The one takeaway I want to make sure that you all recognize, and even though we have overruns and underruns, as a program we are underrunning, and so we are managing within the total allocation. We just have some challenges sometimes in between. We are starting to look at time and how long it takes to deliver projects. That was mentioned yesterday at the commission meeting, how long it takes to deliver projects. And so we're taking a really good hard look at how long it takes to deliver these projects and what is causing that time frame. We're also looking at the size of projects. Size is a definite, there's definitely a correlation with complexity, with size, and so we're trying to take a look and see a certain type of projects, certain size projects, do we have to do something different? Maybe there's different ways of estimating small projects versus large projects and a better way of doing that. Historically, the number of supplementals that have come to the commission has been about 19 a year, or about 3% of the program. And in a couple slides, I'll explain why that's important. We are starting to look at the individual budgets in each phase to understand what's driving costs in each phase of the project. Earlier this morning, you approved a supplemental request for 2 projects that were in design. So that's starting to move in this direction. This slide I'd like to spend just a minute explaining, because I think this is really important. It deals with the implementation of SB 46 and the Commission's role on approving and adopting budgets and approving changes. So on that 19 projects historically that we brought supplementals to the Commission, that was on a population of about 490 budgets, or basically the projects that were in construction. By adding the new force support components, that population goes from 490 budgets to 3,000 budgets. And so there's just an order of magnitude, and we have to look at and work with the Commission to figure out how to best manage that, because it's a huge population now that we have to take a look at and manage accordingly. Our purpose is really, at the end of the day, is optimizing limited resources to maximize outcomes, or in plain language, get more projects out. That's really what we're trying to do in optimizing that money. The third bullet is really aligning portfolio management practices with Commission performance measures. What that gets down to is managing risk, and how do we manage risk. On the schedule front, we've just embarked on our research and looking at data analytics and looking at best practices from other state DOTs and other private entities on managing budgets and how we do that. We'll then be developing recommendations and improvements. In fact, I think as we go through this process, very shortly we're going to start making changes as we find the data to drive those changes internally. But I think there's some things that we need to partner with the Commission on, and there may be some changes we need to do there as well. And then move into a continuous improvement process. And that concludes my report on the cost estimating initiative.
Questions? Piece of cake. You can go back and work on freight. Just kidding. Okay, we are moving now to item 63.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 63 is the Caltrans Project Delivery Report. This will be another piece of cake. Jim will provide a high overview of the report. The actual report is in your Commission book with all of the good information there.
Commissioners, the second quarter report, and I'll flip to slide 3. And at the beginning of our performance measures, Currently, we have 9 performance measures we are tracking. Currently, 7 of those we are anticipated at the current time to meet. There's 2 performance measures that we will not meet, and that regards to delivery projects to construction. There's 2 projects that will not make it to construction. One is my colleague reported at the last commission meeting on the seeds on the Peters Blancas realignment project, where the drought has impacted us, the ability to grow seeds for that project, and so that project is being delayed. The second project is a job that we're planning on delivering, and we have since changed strategy and are actually going to relinquish the route over to a local agency and therefore not deliver that project, but transfer those funds over to that local agency to take that route over from Caltrans. So it's in the end, it's a good investment for the department. On our 2 financial points or performance measures that we're tracking, we are staying within budget. Like I've said, historically, overall, we're staying within budget, and it continues the trend in this year. We are tracking the risks of capital in construction. We currently have 30 projects that are at risk and that we are tracking. This is a point where at the end of the day, we only bring a few of these to you because we manage our way through these, but they are at risk and we are tracking and they are in the report. From a design schedule risk, there are 30 projects that we're tracking out of the 227 that we're delivering right now, or it's about 13% of our portfolio where there is some risk that we're tracking and we're managing through these. Historically, we've delivered 99% of our projects here, so I expect this to be aligned with that, but those are projects we are managing. The NEPA assignment, we heard good news yesterday on AB 28 that's going well. I just want to let you know there are 31 projects that are waiting federal action, and they're in a hold mode right now, and that's both local and state. So we're wait with great anticipation for the approval of AB 28 so we can get those projects going. There are 2 projects that I want to just point out very quickly that are successes. One is the Riverside 91 HOV project. That was a combination project, a partnership project with RCTC, with Prop 1B, STIP, and local funds that just got completed here this fall. And the last slide I have is a shop project, and it's on SAC 160, the 3-mile slough bridge, and it's a painting job. And we can't forget that sometimes those simple projects that we have to do to maintain and preserve the state highway system. And that concludes my remarks.
We have any comments? I have one question for you. The list of 31 projects that are on hold right now, it's always good to personalize things, so have we shined some light on that list to make sure that we can get this bill through the process? So I think we need to make that list very public.
I do not know what we have done on that, but I will follow up and make sure that that is done.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go back to item number 70. I believe that's the information item we had. Mitch?
Yes, item 70 is a STIP amendment for notice for the 684 Interchange Phase 3 project in Contra, Costa County. Staff has reviewed this amendment. The amendment is consistent with STIP guidelines and raises no concerns. Therefore, we will be placing this item on the consent calendar for approval by the Commission in May.
Thank you. All right, what number? Number 79.
Commissioners, item 79 is an information item. Stephen Keck is here to provide a very high-level update on the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program.
This will be my second shortest presentation ever. This is a new book item, and it's a very simple one. As you are aware, the California Transportation Agency is responsible for programming projects into the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program. This book item is simply a display of that program and the current status of projects. So the attached list to the book item details the projects that are currently programmed by the agency, and it's the department's intent to update this list and provide a new book item as it changes moving forward. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Stephen? Hearing none. Okay, I think we have gone through our items. Are there any public comments? Yes, thank you. We do have Commissioner Dunn.
Yeah, and considering the lateness of the hour and the fact that we're at the end of a long agenda, I just wanted to state for the record, the commissioners received a lovely note from David Maxwell, who many of you know since 1972 has been attending Caltrans route hearings, open houses, et cetera, and from 1977, CHC and CTC meetings. An amazing guy, and he's the one that always brought us the cookies, the tins of cookies to share at the commission meeting. So we're all missing the cookies today. No question about it.
And yesterday.
But in light of his time, as he says, as I get older, life becomes busier, and it's hard to find the time to do everything he wants to do, much less the things I really need to do. And he's come to the decision to no longer attend our meetings. He was sort of the mascot of the commission for all of these years. And so, and wrote a very lovely letter. I'm hoping that for our next meeting, we can think of some nice little tribute for David, for all of the work that he's done in being here and supporting our efforts. And again, very, very complimentary of both the commission and the professionalism of our staff. So I just wanted to say that for the record. And Susan, if you have any thoughts on that one.
Commissioners, staff will get in touch with David and invite him to a meeting so that he can be properly recognized.
That would be terrific.
And thanked for all that he's done for this
Yeah.
commission. So we'll be in touch and bring him back here.
We need to be very careful. He knows more about the commission than anybody.
He, absolutely, Joe. He predates you, sir.
I can see that cookie tin being memorialized on a plaque. Yeah, that'll be cool. Anyway, as we're getting ready to adjourn this meeting today, I think for our extended transportation family, we do indeed think of us as a family. So we would like to adjourn this meeting today in memory of Anna Mahler. Anna was a commission Deputy Director Stephen Mahler's mother passed away at the age of 92 after an 18-year struggle with Alzheimer's disease. But the disease that took her life did not define her. Anna was a native of Poland, immigrated to the United States, and after learning the English language, put her technical skills to use and joined several engineering firms in Sacramento as the only female mechanical engineering designer. So those of us ladies in the transportation sector tip our hats to one of our early pioneers, I would say. After passing her exams, Anna joined the Caltrans Office of Bridge Design. We all know where Stephen gets his love of bridges. As the office's first female bridge structural detailer, Level 1, and ultimately retired from Caltrans in 1989 as a bridge structural detailer, Level 3. Anna lived her life surrounded by her loving family, her husband, and enjoyed helping and engaging with the Polish community. She enjoyed traveling, cooking, and gardening. She was a beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Anna is survived by her husband of 68 years, Alexander, and her sons, daughter, and granddaughters. So I'd ask you to offer a moment of silence in Anna's memory. So with that, here's to a life well lived. Stephen, and we honor your mother.